So welcome back to part 4, Hot Springs to Elizabethton, Tennessee. Right now in the beginning, we're picking it back up on the trail right over Hot Springs, North Carolina. And we're going to just recover a few miles from where we stopped last time. So essentially from the water, the ridge goes up a mountain and hangs there for a while up to a parking area. And we're going to reconnect with the trail where we left off. So what's happened? So we've done 3 of these. This is our 4th session, if you would. And even flying the Appalachian Trail on a simulator, I can tell you it's really big. Everything takes time. A lot of fun. I got to see some of the terrain that would be experienced. It's quite high mountains going through the Great Smoky Mountains, Georgia. We continue to stay pretty high elevation here in North Carolina and continuing on the Tennessee border. So Hot Springs, it looked like a really great place to rest, a lot of parking, food, and here we are on top of the ridge, and you can see what is a road access. So this is called Pisgah National Forest, I believe, and it's a very scenic area in terms of you can drive to the top and you can park and walk around. So this is a little parking road. I think this is called Mill Ridge Road, and from there you can park on the top. And that's a short drive off of Route 25, which is a highway, probably has 2 names, one for North Carolina, one for Tennessee, but Highway 25/70. And this is right here with the Silver Mine Creek. So this is where we stopped last time, and looking downward at the crossing of the highway, which has a parking area. From here, you're going to be hiking switchbacks to the tippy top of the next peak, and the next peak is called Rich Mountain. Once again, there's a parking area somewhere on the top, which we may see here from the flight simulator software. And that's on Rich Mountain, going up Rich Mountain Road. And that's quite a switchbacky type road to get to the top, if that's the right word for it. A lot of switchbacks, and you get up to about 3,700 feet elevation. And yes, you can see here on the flight simulator a bit of a road access at the top and a loop. And that's the peak of Rich Mountain. Continuing further, there is a Lookout Mountain Road also up here, and another parking area. So we would go from Rich Mountain summit down a little bit of a valley and then come back up on top after some more switchbacks. And I'm not sure if this peak has a name. And we're on our way to Spring Mountain Shelter. And that's coming up. You can see the label. It's a little hard to read those labels, but the good thing about the labels, on the upper right side, I do have the trail. It gives you an idea. If you're really interested in this journey with me, you can listen to what shelter I'm talking about. So this is Spring Mountain Shelter. We're flying over now. And more information would be on Guthook and other software in the trail guide. There is a bit of a repetition. I know it's the flight software. It's not real mountains. So on the far side of this journey, you can see that there is a plain, if you would, that's on the Tennessee side where you do come down off the mountain and you have a little lower elevation. So you're able to see a bit into the next county. Looking north here towards Greenville, Tennessee. It's kind of what you're seeing there in the distance, and at the same time cutting up and over some of these mountain ridges. So because of the time domain of being on the trail versus flying, I did elect to just start these to split these journeys up a little smaller chunks. It's a little hard to follow sometimes, and of course do your best to cover the journey. So we're still flying the Tennessee and North Carolina border. So I'm trying to see what highway we just flew over. That is Route 208, North Carolina 208 highway. There is parking at that junction. And we're making our way up to the next mountain, which looks like we're around 3,000 feet. So not quite as high. And once again, since I am simulating a plane, you can see the altimeter on the lower right side. That's our altitude. Altitude is basically above sea level if I calibrate it correctly. So it's more or less, we're having to go up here. So anytime a mountain's about 4,000 feet, I'm trying to fly about 1,000 feet over it. You can see we're coming up to another label. That label would be another shelter. And in this case, the shelter would be Little Laurel Shelter. So pushing steadily uphill from Hot Springs. So what else is going on? I've been practicing my flying between the Appalachian Trail, home base is New Jersey, and using Lincoln Park Airport as sort of home base on some of the training I've been doing. So here we are flying over Little Laurel Shelter right about at this spot. And talking with a friend who has a plane and planning loosely, if you would, the possibility for me flying over the New Jersey Appalachian Trail section, and hopefully I can figure out how to film that with a GoPro or something if I can get up there and show maybe some of the simulator flight, but maybe some of the real flight too. We're still quite a ways from New Jersey, so I'm dreaming a little bit. I'm also thinking about my next hiking trip. Just finished a wedding this weekend at my house. My daughter got married. Daughter Allison. Very wonderful ceremony to her new husband Nick, and that went off without a hitch, but they did get hitched. So the fun bit now is that I can start thinking about some of my own time, because when you have a wedding in your backyard, as you'd imagine, takes quite a lot of effort and planning. So we're coming over another parking area. This parking area is called Black Stack Cliffs parking area. You can see the road in this simulation. So it's pretty cool when these roads come right up to the ridge. A little different than the Smoky Mountains when you're really past huge swaths of land without any real road crossing. Here in this section of North Carolina and Tennessee, you really can get on and off the trail pretty much at will. Every, say, 5 or 10 miles, we seem to be hitting a nice trail crossing. And this, you can see ahead that the ridge banks pretty hard to the right, and it makes a U-turn, essentially. I think we're going to be following that ridge. So this is a good idea that the Appalachian Trail, they follow the high mountains when they did the trail design. They didn't necessarily follow north-south, if you would. So looking ahead, again on this flight and looking at the trail map, I can see that there's a pretty hard bank to the south that's going to occur, and it looks like we're going to be following that ridge line right up ahead. So as a hiker, you're feeling like you're pushing north, and you are here, but pretty soon you're heading a little more due east, and then before you know it, you're heading almost due south. So sometimes that can be a little disheartening. The trail's really long, the mileage are long, and so you make your way north, and all of a sudden you're going to come up to a ridge like that, and it's going to do an about face, and then you head south, and you're like, kind of like, why, you know, are these like pointless up and downs or something? But this is the trail. You know, you can't question the why. Sometimes that is the trail. That's what other people have done. So pushing forward, this should be Jerry Cabin Shelter we're flying over now. Jerry Cabin. The altitude here, from a plane standpoint is a little different. Let's see if I can find a trail map. Yeah, we're probably between about close to 4,000 feet elevation in this region on this ridge line. So I'm going to kind of fly in the front of this turnaround. I learned from experience on some of the prior things not to overshoot the trail. It doesn't really make any sense, and then you just have to make a harder turn or reconnect to the trail. So I'm trying to stay on the inside track here, still give you a view. Sometimes I will fly over it just for fun. So it looks like the trail goes a little wider than I was expecting, and it's going to push its way downhill now as it makes its way south. So I turned a little inside thinking the trail was making that tighter turn, but it is going a little more east than I thought it was going to do here. So from this place you can see all the way down to what looks like an interstate running in the distance. And it looks like the hills go down, so we're going to lose elevation for this next section. So after Jerry, what's this called here again? Jerry Cabin Shelter. Looks like you have the ability now to start making your way downhill into a valley. The mountains peak out here close to 5,000 feet. So about this section of Rich Mountain, I think it's what it's called, is about 4,900 feet. And they have this labeled as Cold Spring Mountain. Cold Spring Mountain. So now we're heading south, and we're going over another shelter. That shelter is called Flint Mountain Shelter. So we just passed over Flint Mountain Shelter. And I said it was going downhill, but I think maybe the vistas are just bigger because it looks like we're still pretty high up. We've dropped some elevation at this point. We're going to continue down this valley in front of us and cross a road. And the road is 352. Highway has two names, like most of these, one name in Tennessee, one name in North Carolina. So it's called Highway 212 or Highway 352. And it also goes by the name, let's see what we got here, Devil Fork Road. Devil Fork Road. So we're crossing over that. Continuing down into the valley. There is parking at this road crossing. So Devil Fork Road crossing. And the gap here is called Devil Fork Gap. Devil Fork Gap. So we just pushed over that. And in each one of these valleys, we're going to cross another road. So a couple switchbacks up and down another peak. Much lower elevation than just a few moments before. So these are closer to 3,000 feet. And we're continuing to head south on a ridge through a place called Sugarloaf Mountain. And there is something called Bald Mountain. And once again, here on this peak, it's going to go back uphill somewhat. And we're going to get over 4,000 feet again to about 4,600 feet. So it's called this Divide Mountain or Bald Mountain right in this region. And we're in that little lower section of Tennessee that gets a little raggedy, if you would. Tennessee follows the Appalachian Trail quite a bit for its border in North Carolina. So this is that southern section of Tennessee on the map. also the eastern section. So we finished our flight south, and now at least from a hiking perspective, we're going back east. So we're not losing southern miles, if you would, that you previously made up on the previous day's hike. Another shelter crossing here, Hogback Ridge Shelter, Hogback Ridge Shelter. Fun name. And this is pushing us toward another interstate, it looks like. So Interstate 26. You can see it all in all its simulated glory here. Probably cars going by and cheesy road crossings. There is parking right here at this juncture. There it is. Cheesy cars driving in the woods. So that is the parking area at Sam's Gap. That's what we're going to call that area. Sam's Gap, Interstate 26, and US 23 parking area. Once you get to Sam's Gap, we begin turning northward again, essentially coming up the ridge on the other side. And this is going to push us up to about 4,000 feet. Once again, that's going to take us to a parking area, and it happens to be still called Divide Mountain. I don't know really how this works or why, but it must have to do with the gap. Another highland region. Pretty gentle hiking compared to some of the Smokies in terms of you are going uphill, but you're just not being rocked by one gap after another. And this turn into this section of Tennessee and North Carolina really took you into the heart of the mountains. Unlike even about 10 minutes before, you don't really see the sort of lower plains of Tennessee as much. So you're a little more remote here. So technically this section is called the Bald Mountain still. And I think in the distance you can see High Point, and that will be Bald Mountain Shelter. Looks like there are some folks around here, some houses. I always like having a house nearby when I'm hiking. It just, like, I've never knocked their door or whatever. You know, I guess it could be a horror movie coming off of a trail and ending up in somebody's backyard, you know, that they're unexpected to see a hiker, or, you know, people have shotguns and whatnot, you know. But in some ways, just seeing a house when I'm hiking, it makes me feel like, you know, if you ever did have a problem, like there are some people nearby, or there's a car access or something like that. It's you spend so much time on the trail that you go through all these crazy thoughts in your head about, you know, the peace of being alone and solitude and the accomplishments you make. And on another level, you're like, you know, comforted by the fact that you can see a car, or you know, see lights on in a house or something. But, you know, you never knock the doors. So this is Bald Mountain. Not surprisingly, there's a little bald patch on the top. Bald Mountain Shelter. And you can even see a little bit of the Appalachian Trail on the flight simulator. You're a long way from Pennsylvania here, and obviously a little bit higher elevation, but it looks like a general ridge walk that you do see in Pennsylvania. As you go north, you tend to follow these ridges for a long period of time. This one's taking us up to about 5,200 feet at this peak. So not surprisingly, the southern part of the Appalachian Trail is quite high in terms of its overall average elevation compared to, you know, sections you go through West Virginia or Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, even New York State, Connecticut. They're quite low in comparison, so you get a little bit of a reprieve from some of the higher mountains for a while. This section is in North Carolina now. We've sort of left Tennessee for a little bit of time. It's not on the border. This is called Unica Mountains. Not sure of the spelling. Unica. Walking around 4,000 feet. I like the metric system, but for some reason with hiking, especially hikes in the United States, I never got around to kilometers and meters in terms of my heights and measures. So I zoomed out on the main map just to see where all the shelters are, and zooming back in again, just trying to keep my bearings going on the trail. So there's a road crossing coming up about now. This is called Spivey Gap, US 19W parking. I guess it's right over, somewhere over this ridge. My little plane icon map might be a little out of sync with the plane flying, because I do overlay them. It also depends on the angle of attack. Like the plane might have been over a gap, and from the view you might not see the road. So Spivey Gap, that's US 19W parking area. That's what we just crossed. Going to make a few turns, and the next shelter will be the No Business Knob Shelter. So an interesting name. I don't know if no means north for an abbreviation, but it looks like No Business Knob Shelter. So that's all serious here. You have to, definitely not crack any jokes when you're at the No Business Knob Shelter. So at this point, you're looking ahead, and we are seeing a bit of a gap or a highway area. So you will be going downhill, having a little bit of a nice walk downhill from there. So we just passed over the No Business Knob Shelter, and we're going to be pushing towards Jones Branch Road, and it says Jones Branch Road, Chestoa parking area. So a couple more little peaks, and that'll take you down into that section. There's several parking areas here. This is Highway 3626. Just seeing if we crossed that earlier. Yes. So this is the same highway we crossed. Again, that was sort of a simulated highway crossing. This shows you how it doubled back and went north. So if you did need to hitchhike or thumb a ride up to this section, you could have done this from the south and sort of made a driving loop between those two sections of the highway. So on Interstate 26 here. So we're making our way down now to Unica Springs Road, and there's a parking area. So we're just a little bit off the highway and crossing the Nolichucky River, if I said it right. And that's a section of town there called River Hill. And the town looks like it's called the town of Irwin. You're seeing over there to the left on the main screen. Town of Irwin. So that looks like a really nice resupply. Very big town compared to some of the towns we've crossed here on the trail to this point. So right here is a shelter. Curly Maple Gap Shelter will be coming up soon. So the next label is Curly Maple Gap Shelter. And I like having these labels at least on the map. They're a little hard to read, obviously, coming off the iPad. You can see them on the iPad if you're scrolling in and looking at it as you're flying, but it's definitely hard to read here, and the resolution maybe it's not so great. But at the end of the day, it's helping me because it's obviously a lot of these hills, you know, especially on a simulator, they're a little cheesy and they look kind of the same. So in terms of an external person observing this and observing the ridge line, you know, you got to really be into this and saying I want to hike this. So the number one recommendation of this is to pull up my video and kind of look at the same time at another trail reference, such as the Appalachian Trail Conservatory interactive map, and that's what I'm using basically to look up most of the shelter names or road crossings. So if you want to get your own bearings and pause where I'm at and look at the other map, that's definitely highly advisable. So another parking area as we come through this next gap section. So this is called Indian Grave Gap, Tennessee Route 395 parking area. So Tennessee Route 395, Indian Grave. So I'm thinking that's a little road or creek down there that we're crossing. So with the creek there should be water. A little further down, now we're going to cross another parking area called Beauty Spot. So that's where you put your makeup on if you're a lady. Just kidding. So it's Beauty Spot parking area. And all of a sudden we're going a little bit more uphill, and it took me by a little surprise that I'm having to push some elevation again. So we're pushing up towards a little over 5,185 feet. This is called Unaka Mountain. So we're getting back to Unaka. Maybe that's a tribal name. And up on top here are some road access points on Unaka Mountain Road. And another scenic little location up here called Pleasant Garden. So we have Pleasant Garden, which is about 4,867 feet above sea level. So quite a nice push in terms of elevation. This next mountain, I think, is Unaka Mountain proper, which is 5,185. So you're going to be very happy to get to the top. I think it's the highest mountain in the area. So right now I'm pushing a angle of over 2 degrees, full throttle. My airspeed's dropping, and I'm like, can I make this mountain? Yes. 3-degree angle climbing, just about to stall, but making it. And still tracking the Appalachian Trail. So we're over the top, made it. This takes us, the viewpoint ahead is called the Iron Mountain Range. Iron Mountain Range, a little name change from our Unaka Mountain to Iron Mountain. And you can see it's pretty rugged now. We go through some rolling hills into something that looks a little more aggressive in terms of the mountain line. So that'll be the Iron Mountains. We're approaching our next shelter, Cherry Gap Shelter. Let's see if I get an elevation here. Still looking to be about 4,500 feet. Maybe not quite so high, but some of the neighboring hills. So we dropped about 500 feet from the peak. And now we're going over the Cherry Gap section here. Somewhere right in this region, you're going to find another shelter. Probably just beyond this next ridge. And like many areas on this section, there is another road crossing coming up, and this is called Iron Mountain Gap. Gonna have to get a little bit of a bearing where that's happening. See if it looks logical here. I think down here you can see a little road we're gonna fly over in a minute. Several parking areas right in this region. Iron Mountain Gap parking area. And then there's one just a little nearby that is called the Iron Mountain Gap Alternative Parking Area. So probably, yeah, and I'm shooting down so you can see it now. So there's a road crossing there. Kind of marks the spot. So I'm going to go ahead and record all the audio to Elizabethton, Tennessee, which is the really a logical distance for this flight. So I did the first flight from Pigeon Forge. Probably took me about an hour and a half to do this entire flight, and I broke it up to Hot Springs the first time. So if I see a logical place here, I might break this one up as well and pick it back up. But for right now, the thing about the Appalachian Trail, it is very long. So even flying over it at 90 miles an hour, it's still going to take a really long time to fly over these little regions like we're doing. And you know, if you're bored by it, I guess you can speed up. I think from an external standpoint, if you're watching this, it's really because you're looking at these some of these features and learning about a section you might be interested in hiking. I'm doing this more for section hikers than through hikers. The mentality of a through hiker is going to be completely different than someone having to plan a section and understand where some of these trail crossings would be or some of these resupply points. Not totally. I mean, they still have to get food. They still have to get their water. But from a logistics standpoint, the parking areas and, you know, doing a shuttle or something like that is really key for someone who's doing day hikes or a week-long section hike or so. So we're passing through the Iron Mountains, cruising a ridge line on top, and we're flying over the Clyde Smith Shelter. You can see a little lake to your left of the screen. That's called, looks like Roaring Creek. No, sorry, Ripshin Lake. Once again, we're dive bombing here to the south. Big direction change. So right after Clyde Smith Shelter, the trail once again dive bombs back south. So this whole section, you're kind of just making your way north, south, north, south. Overall direction, mostly easterly. Overall, a little bit to the north as always. Pass over another parking area, Hughes Gap. You definitely some roads in that area. And we're still pushing south, so Hughes Gap. It's a parking area. And this is Roan Mountain, highest mountain in this section. Back at that, 6,286 feet. So I'm pushing 3% angle trying to climb it. So it took me by surprise. Flying a little lower elevation, and all of a sudden, boom, here we go. Roan Mountain High Knob. And there's a shelter on top. when we get there. Absolutely at the very top. Probably can't see it on the simulator, but it is sitting up there, so you're going to have a nice view. Still pushing 3% altitude. Oh, made it. I can pull back now. So it's kind of like, yeah, I'm not hiking, I'm not having to work my way up there, but you know, just how hard it was just to go from a lower elevation upward, even flying. You can see the elevation changes that way. So a couple of parking areas here. This is Carver's Gap, a fan favorite on a lot of Appalachian Trail section hikes. Everybody's like, hey, we're doing Roan Mountain, Carver's Gap. You can kind of see the iron oxide in the soil here. Walking along that Carver's Gap road is down there to the right. Trail basically staying on the ridgeline. So Roan Mountain Highlands here. Place I would very much like to visit. Roan Mountain, Carver's Gap. So you're able to stay up on the highlands for quite a while on a ridge. We're coming up to our next shelter, Stan Murray Shelter. Stan Murray Shelter. Not surprisingly, it's a popular area. You're going to find another shelter soon after this one. That's going to be on a mountain called Yellow Mountain. And let's see if they call it that. This is called Overnight Mountain. Over Mountain Shelter. So the next one is going to be called Over Mountain Shelter. And this is on our driving road, so it looks like you can come up on Roaring Creek Road. And let's see if we can see the road here in a second. It actually comes from the south, and I'm flying a little bit south myself right now, I think, compared to the trail. So right here is the shelter. Over Mountain Shelter, right in this section. Very pronounced bald ridge coming off Yellow Mountain. South of here is Big Yellow Mountain. So I don't know where they get their names, but you can see, at least on the simulation, the grass has a yellow look to it. I don't know if that's the reason why. Who knows? We're flying over Little Hump Mountain, which is about 5,200 feet elevation. And this is going over Hump Mountain. So they didn't think it was big enough, so it must be like a camel's hump from the distance. And this is now about 5,500 feet, some great vistas. Here I am dive bombing pretty close to the edge, having fun. So when you get a little bored of flying, you can kind of rip a little bit, going up to about 130 knots. And realizing I'm going to have to climb again and try not to stall. Airspeed dropping. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I better turn a little bit, get over this one. And we did it. Wow, beautiful section here. Get to cruise downhill. That's fun. Getting in a section called Doll Flats. Morgan Branch Creek. And there's a couple of roads that come pretty close. As you can see here, there's some farmlands and civilization in this area. And we're going to be heading downhill to cross over another highway interstate. And there seems to be a shelter listed here, but it's not listed on the Appalachian Trail Conservatory, but it seems to be listed in terms of the labels. And we're hitting Memorial Highway now. So there's parking here, doing a little downward shot of the highway. And this is crossing over Route 37, Route 19E, at a place called Upper Shell Creek. Upper Shell Creek. There's another parking area here, so more road access. Quite a few roads up in this area. You can see them left and right. So a little simpler section to jump on and off the trail in this section. There's a parking area, Campbell Tract parking area. Campbell Tract parking area. And got a little bit of a highland here, which is going to push us down some switchbacks to some lower elevation. In fact, the trail planners could have gone a few different ways here. So I'm going to drive downhill, and there's a creek on the bottom. And it still seems to be close to the Tennessee border. I think we're in Tennessee technically now. And very, very briefly on this turn, pop into North Carolina, back into Tennessee. So still generally holding the border. Now, there's another shelter listed here, which might have been, this might be the correct location, but the Mountaineer Fall Shelter, somewhere in this region. Once again, another parking area here. So plenty of access throughout this region. Multiple parking areas. More parking areas than shelter, if you would. Lower elevation. Trying to get an idea of the height here. Based on my altimeter, probably about 3,500 feet. This is called Walnut Mountain Parking, about this area. Then you go a little further, this is called Bitter End Road Parking. And see if that, what direction that comes from. So Bitter End Road comes from the main highway, the Veterans Memorial Parkway, which is Route 37, Route 19E. So that helps you get to this section. This becomes what's called White Rocks Mountain. So in White Rocks, there's another shelter we're approaching called Moorland Gap Shelter. Moorland Gap. And that's labeled in green again, if you just want to see where we are passing over that. Moorland Gap Shelter. And this section does parallel the highway pretty well. So just a few miles to the south. West, south, southwest, there is a highway. Right now our general direction is west, flying, hiking. And here we turn north. Interesting that some of these flights are long enough that the position of the sun changes like it does during a normal day. And this is still White Rocks section. Elevation's about 4,200 feet. Nice ridge line. And this will take us north. And at this point flying, it's amazing how much, you know, I know it's a simulator and it is mapping the actual geographic information that's here on Earth and the Appalachian Trail section. But it's just amazing to me after now, you know, being the fourth video into it, it's still amazing how much it looks the same in some respects. And I think when you're hiking, you know, there's also sometimes a sense of monotony in terms of the vistas you look at. And then when you see something that's really, you know, remarkable or sticking out, you know, it kind of rekindles why you're doing it. So it's kind of interesting even for here. You know, we went through some of the more difficult sections of the Smoky Mountains. Now there's a lot more road crossings. But just the Appalachian Mountains just keep going. I mean, in some ways it's like almost unforgiving. This is Dennis Cove Road we just passed over. And I think this is a section where you kind of will get that respite a little bit from the monotony. We're going through a totally different section here into a lake region. So we're passing a shelter called Laurel Fork Shelter. And this is going to make our way down through some switchbacks into the lake region itself. And I'm trying to figure out what lake it is. It's huge. Let's see if I can find out here. I'm not even sure. It's so big I had to go far away to look for the label. Watauga, if that's the right pronunciation. Watauga Lake. And looks like, trying to see what state it's in. Watauga Lake, very cool. I don't know, it looks like it may even border both states again. So what I'm going to do here is point out right below me now at the head of the lake, if you would, there is a parking area. So it's called US 321 parking area. And the trail buzzes right here on the left side of the lake. So on the western side, if you would, you will be staying a bit on the lower elevation around this lake. I don't know if there's a little dam section or what the natural geography is, but very beautiful section. So after some of the monotony I was just talking about, flying over the White Rocks and Roan Mountain Highlands area, this does take you down. This is still called Iron Mountain to the left, so this is a continuation of Iron Mountain. And here there's a gap with Wilbur Lake. There's another sort of gap in a lake between the main lake. I don't know if that's an old stream geologically called Wilbur Lake. The trail passes to the right, and that's where we're hovering. This has Lookout Road and another parking area called Watauga Dam Road parking area. Watauga Dam. So I guess this lake was dammed off in that section, so maybe that's what we're looking at. And then Wilbur Lake was where the runoff would go. And I think our other bigger lake south of here was Fontana Lake, and that one had a more pronounced dam. So here we're going to fly over a little bit of a ridge here. So we got a pretty nice ridge. It's a pronounced ridge. It borders the lake, so you can keep the lake on your southeast side. You're going to fly the ridge or hike this ridge, and you get your bearings. To the immediate northwest from where we're flying is Elizabethton. That's in Tennessee. And the Watauga River goes through that. So what I plan on doing here is that, you know, one of the things about flying over a mountain region, if you were doing this in real world, not just a simulation, is you have to find an airport. So as you can see there on the left side, there is a town, there's villages, and there is an airport. In the distance, you can see the Appalachian Mountains continue. And generally, that will be our heading for quite a while. Almost the same heading we're flying at the moment, which is about 60 degrees. Let's call it that northeast, east-northeast, northeast. We're going to continue heading northeast for quite a while. We're getting close to Virginia. So we've been in Tennessee and North Carolina for quite a long time. And I really got to give people their credit for hiking this far from Georgia. Wow, what a distance. Maybe on a pop-up I'll write down how many miles we got to at this point. I think that'll be valuable. I'll dig around a little bit. So here I am saying I'm out of here. So I'm making my turn down a valley. And I think we're going to continue this video to the landing. So I'm going to pop out. And that was right at a shelter. That was Vandy Venter. I think I popped out at Vandy Venter Shelter. I'm pretty sure that's what I was trying to do. So I had some bearings, or at least the idea of that. And we're going to fly into the town of Elizabethton, if that's the right way to say it again. It's one thing about reading off a map. But you can explore the world in many different ways. You can watch videos, you can play a video game, like in this case, you can hike the hike, you can go on blogs, you can go on Google Earth, and when you're planning a hike, we encourage everyone to do all of that. Keep your airspeed up. So now I'm jumping back to the cockpit mode. Cockpit modes allows me to line the top of my dash where I generally want to land. You can see there's some green stripes. I think those bars are generally the zone that the airport is encouraging you to land after. And so there's something called landing on the numbers, and that would be the direction of the runway. So I'm coming in now. Something called a flare, where you pull up and you try to land a little bit level. So I land a little short of the numbers. Runway 24. And I'm happy to be down. And glad you joined me on this section. So this section went from Hot Springs to Elizabethton, Tennessee. And we are going to pick it up on the trail from here. Thank you and enjoy.